Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Heathen Bitches podcast. I am your host, Sigrun. Today with me are my co-hosts, Fishy
Fishy.
and Glade.
Hey, yo.
And today we are going to be talking about a very special topic that 99% of you probably have no idea.
I have no idea.
So, today we are going to introduce the topic that, while most of you have no idea, you probably should, because it is honestly kind of a big deal. How much of a big deal? Well, there's a lot of things that you've probably seen in like some Reconstructionist stuff over the years. If you look at that sort of thing, you probably saw glimpses of it while scrolling through Wikipedia or any other such website that might be detailing aspects of your religion or myth or language or anything of the sort. Today, we are going to discuss horse girls.
What?
Specifically, a group of horse girls and horse boys, and probably some sort of non-binary thing, you know.
Horse X. The
Horse
future
X.
of horses. We're talking about PIE, folks.
We're talking about PIE. We are talking about Proto Indo-European. What is Proto Indo-European? I'm sure 99% of you are asking at this very second.
Hey, Sigrun.
Yeah.
What is Proto Indo-European? I can't.
What does that
We can't do
mean?
that. What does it mean?
So we should probably get a few things out of the way in terms of explanation regarding this. The first thing you should know is that, it is predominantly linguistic. So, for example, the language that we are speaking here today, English, it is a Germanic language. And Germanic languages are Indo-European languages. Indo-European languages include the aforementioned Germanic, the Italic languages, which, nowadays we know as the Romance, because one Italic language, Latin, Greek, Slavic, Celtic, Iranian, and
Sanskrit.
Sanskrit and all the other, like, North Indian languages. The technical name for that one might come off a bit spicy, but, that's joy. So basically, the whole idea of it is that all of these languages, and a couple others that I haven't mentioned, like extinct ones like Tocharian, Anatolian, they're all linked. They were all discovered to be linked to a sort of ancestral core, not necessarily a single language, but like an ancestral familial thing. And all this discovery was done in a span of a couple hundred years, starting with the imperialization of India and kind of expanding onward from there, where European scholars traveled to the subcontinent and read a bunch of books and were like, holy shit, that guy's name is like Zeus. What the fuck? This is fucking weird. There's something here, man. And so it kind of expanded, and now we have this big, giant, beautiful theory of language that basically resulted in a reconstructed language, so a reconstructed proto-language for all of these different languages that we refer to as Proto-Indo-European.
It's worth mentioning at this time that there is no Proto-Indo-European people. It's a reconstructed language of what we think was the language that diverged in these ways. But there wasn't like a singular group of people who were the Proto-Indo-Europeans.
Correct. While we have reconstructed a single language, technically speaking, what likely existed was what likely always exists with peoples. Different dialects, different languages, different sort of culture groups, different this, different that. The idea of reconstructing a language is basically we trace all the words back to what they might have looked like in a single source.
This is linguistic fondue using aged cheeses.
Yes. And
There's the food metaphor.
I had to.
She was planning on that this whole time. Anyway.
Shh, don't reveal the secrets.
Anyway, again, the basic gist is these words are traced back to a single source. Might not have exactly looked like that reconstructed word, but we can kind of okayly say that it would have resembled what we reconstructed. Therefore, here we go. Here's a word in Proto Indo-European. And that's all well and good. The language stuff is good. It might be kind of useful. But when we're discussing Proto Indo-European, there's a constellation around that language that tends to be what's being focused on. Now that we've gotten the language part of the way, we could probably discuss that little constellation, that little group of things that surround the language of Proto-Indo-European. Namely, what others, including linguists, have done to extrapolate from that language into the idea of who spoke it. There's been theories throughout the years of who spoke it, some more monumentally racist and insane than others, but nowadays the most accepted one is going to be the basically steppe nomads. Nomadic peoples who existed on the Eurasian steppe somewhere in modern Ukraine, Russia, the steppes north of the Caucasus. This is where we assume this group originated from, based on words for horses, wheels. That was a very important one. Just the way this language seems to revolve around a lot of this kind of shit. Around horses and wagons and carts and all that sort of thing. Very pastoral, nomadic language. So from there, we have these nomads. They spread out from this initial area where they leave their stuff behind, archaeological cultures and whatnot, and they start spreading around, and they spread more, and they spread even more, until finally, they're the entirety of Europe, huge parts of the Middle East, and because of a few languages in Europe, most of the fucking planet because of colonialism.
They had wheels in Proto Indo-Europe?
Yes.
That surprised me too. I was not even wheels, but wagons? That's
Yes.
My dogs are going crazy. I hope that's not picking up.
I hear no dogs.
Oh, fuck yeah. Wagons.
Yes.
I mean,
they existed a long while, and they were
I bet.
pretty prominent on the steppe. We found archaeological sites in the steppe. You read it in books like The Horse and Wheel Language by David Anthony. We'll be putting that along with a whole bunch of other sources into the description below. Basically, there was a site somewhere in the Central Asian steppe where they found a whole bunch of buried chariots or wagons or whatever. These were very old. This is a very old site, probably dated to around the time of or just before the Indo-Iranian migrations, before the Iranian peoples and the Indo-Aryan peoples. That's the word that is kind of spicy. Before those peoples invaded or migrated, whatever, from the steppes into India and the Middle East and started establishing themselves. And that's kind of also how we sort of figure out their presence in a lot of places. There's a kingdom in Mesopotamia, the Mitanni kingdom. They had their own language, but that language, we look through it, has some very interesting words derived from an Indo-Iranian source. Because there's a lot of gods referenced that were from the Indo-Iranian pantheon, and also words from Indo-Iranian referring to chariot riders. So yeah, that is basically the gist. You had these group of peoples. They spoke similar languages. They came from the steppe, and they blobbed all over the fucking planet. As they blobbed, they of course split and separated. Their languages evolved, and they lost the fact that they all kind of originated from a single source, and now everyone just kind of existed because no one was writing back in the days of the steppe. Pretty much all of these cultures only end up with written sources much later, by which point it's pretty much a guesswork of where they came from, and they certainly weren't really asking it. They just started to assume, oh, we came from where we're at. And in a lot of respects, that's kind of true, because these migrators took over the initial peoples. They kind of blended together with the Indo-European stuff kind of just winning because it's the prestigious language and the prestigious culture, but the original core is still there as substrate.
People doing what people do,
Yeah.
which is moving places and then acting like they didn't move anywhere.
Yeah.
This is their home. No, that's not what I was trying to say. Oh, fuck.
Well, it's a good thing.
People doing what people do. They blob all over the place, and then once they've blobbed enough, they just keep blobbing. Things change. We don't like to stay the same. So I think we've thoroughly covered, or Sig has thoroughly covered, the language portion of PIE and like where it comes from and all that shit. Should we start talking about religion?
You know who loves languages? Recons.
No.
I can't
Damn.
believe it.
It's true. It's true. I am a filthy language nerd, even though I know only one language.
I mean, mood.
Sometimes those recons tend to read into the language a little bit too much.
What do you mean? Are you trying to tell me that the Aeoten are not, the Rakshasas are not Greek succubus?
Succubus.
Succubus.
I think Titan is the word you were looking for.
Yeah. In addition.
Obvious comparison point. Titans and succubi, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, when you put the two of them together, they're just about as important. I don't even think succubus is Greek.
No.
I think that's a brainworm right there.
We are doing great things here tonight, folks.
PIE for religion. Recons love language bullshit. And when you look at it, you can tell that there's a lot of similarities between the myth that is in all these places connected by language. Who would have guessed written myth and language would have something to do with each other?
Holy shit. Never would have thought.
It stems to reason that there may be some Proto Indo-Euro myth that things stem out of in cases. And it doesn't mean that it always has to stay the same. As we said, people like to change, but there are some real big similarities that you see popping up across the board.
It's interesting because, like, part of the reconstruction of the language was reconstructing those myths and, like, really noticing common tropes. Like, it's more tropes than actual concrete myths that keep showing up. But those tropes really do explain a lot, both of the Proto-Indo-European peoples and of their descendants, of what was important enough that they kept repeating it. For example, we have, like, common deities, like common deity names that kind of get transmitted down through the ages and get reused, as it were. So, for example, a very common deity, probably the most common deity name, are names derived from the name Deus, or Deus Pater.
As I pronounce it, Deus.
Or Deus. Deus is also... Deus means gods. Deus means sky god. Basically, the sky. The sky, personified, deified, whatever.
And this is the reconstructed root for the word deity, isn't it?
Yes, that's through Deus, as was mentioned. Like, basically, Deus gets morphed a bit. It kind of has a derivative that's Deus, and from there we get Deus, Dei, which means deity, as well as, like, both Zeus and Deus gives us a lot of names throughout Indo-European religions. For example, the Vedic deity, Vedic being, the earliest stage of Indian religion we see Dyaushpatar, and with the Greeks, we of course see Deus, or Zeus, Zeus. The Romans, we have, Jupiter, or Jupiter. For that derivative of Deus, we get stuff like the Baltic Dievas, and the Germanic Tiwas, or Tiu, or Tyr for you Norse heads.
Tiwas.
There's other deities as well, like the thunder deity Perquilnos, who also has a epithet of something like Sten. Perquilnos, the name Perquilnos, we get Perun, Perkunas. From Sten, we get Taranis and Thunras, or Thunor, or Thor.
Some of the times, the words that become out of other words they appear nothing alike. Like sometimes these cognates look really close, and then other times it's wild, like Sten to the one you
Yeah.
just said. I can't
Yeah,
remember how to say
yeah,
it.
like that kind of happens because, like, for example, with Tyrannus, you get, Tyrannus comes from Tonaros. For some reason, the N and the R kind of got switched. I don't know how or why. I'm not a linguist, so I can't explain that, but language does that. Language just kind of does that. It just kind of, things get jumbled around as people speak. Like our modern English dialect, for example, like the one I'm speaking, it's already different from something someone is saying in fucking Britain, and both of ours are different from what our predecessors were saying 100 years ago.
Or even even you can notice the
Yeah.
change like 10 years ago. Like think of every time that you've ironically or unironically said sus. Or something. Boom, you have suddenly changed you've cut off a massive portion of the word, and that'll change over time. Or like slang, like
Holy shit, that sussy baka is pretty based.
I was gonna go with like strapped or that's cap, but yeah, holy shit, that sussy baka is based. This is the evolution of language, folks. If you didn't feel doomer before, I hope you do now. But imagine that after thousands and thousands of years, things change a lot.
So we went over those two deities. There's a lot of other deities. There's the Earth Mother deity. There's the divine kind of solary twins motif that are protectors. Shit, there's like a whole host of reconstructed deities. Some more confirmable, some less. It really depends on the person who's reconstructing. Like a lot of broad reconstruction was done by a guy named Bruce Lincoln. We'll quote some of his stuff in the bottom. Others have disagreed on those reconstructions. There's a sort of reconstruction where one fucking annoying French guy tried to like assign a sort of triple function to like the ruling deities. It doesn't. I'm going to say it right here. Demazel's a fucking dumbass. It doesn't really pan out. Y'all, we're just going to have to read to know why I said that, because that will really dramatically run this runtime way over. But yeah, there's a whole lot of shit, and then we get to like the actual myths that are being told. We have, like I said, certain tropes that show up repeatedly. Like, for example, there's a certain common cosmogony, a sort of creation story that has whose basic roots seem to stem from Proto Indo-European. So basically, the reconstructed creation myth, you probably will notice something if you think a little hard on what I'm about to say. There were two guys, Mandu, man, and Yemo, twin. With them is a cow. They're kind of wandering a empty space void thing that pretty much came out of nothing. One day, Manu and Yemo kind of look at each other, and Manu's like, twin, my beloved twin, if I kill you and chop you to pieces with the help of the gods, I can make the universe.
You can say there's more than just nothing?
Yeah, that's...
Go for it.
Yeah.
You can have my body.
Hell yeah. So, with the help of a bunch of deities, again, the aforementioned Skyfather is one of them, Deus, they kill Yemo and chop him into roughly 8 pieces. That tends to be like one of the common things. They chop him into pieces, and they use different body parts to make different parts of the world. And then they kill the cow, and they use the cow to make the rest of life. From the body parts of Yemo, you end up with humans. Like, I think from like his chest or something you get humans. I can't remember. I know if you're taking fucking Demazel's triple function shit, it's like the head produces the priests and kings, the body produces the warriors, and the dick produces the fucking farmers.
Yeah, the loins. I hated saying that. But then also, like, yeah, this is also kind of where we see shit like the caste system start to come up, pop out of that.
This is why I started yelling at Demazel a bit earlier, because he kind of Georges de Maisel, as influential as he was with like the actual study of Proto Indo-European, had a theory which I refer to as trifunctionality, or the trifunctional hypothesis, in which the ruling deities, the ruling classes of men, everything had a basis in a sort of triple structure. The priest kings on top, the warriors in the middle, and everyone else on the bottom. This is very clearly just the fucking Indian caste system, but extrapolated to be everyone, and allegedly hints in every culture, in their pantheons and whatnot. This is loose as shit. A lot of people in the Indo-European fields have yelled at him for this shit. He's also kind of reactionary. We were talking about sus things. He was a bit sus. So yeah, I'm sure you've noticed some parts of that creation myth that might be similar to something you've seen. Yemo, for example. You can probably tell what might have descended from Yemo.
Loki.
No.
No.
A certain Jotun in Norse myths you might know as Ymir. One of the most very clear examples of the Yemo sort of motif, though instead of being sacrificed for the first man, you see three gods just do the deed themselves directly.
Which is kind of similar to the Greek Titans.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. You see this twin motif in other places, like, surprisingly, for example, the myth of Romulus and Remus. Linguists have looked at Remus and kind of think, I think this might have started with a ya and not a ra before, and just kind of got a ra sound, possibly from influence by the fact that the people telling this story were, of course, fucking Romans. So they kind of introduced a new sound to the name, but it still means twin, which explains why he got fucking murdered. Basis of that story is Romulus and Remus found Rome, but because the myth is that Romulus is the founder of Rome, something had to give, and, well, here's fucking Remus being a fucking dipshit, making fun of Romulus's wall plans, and so, stab, 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 he's dead. There we go.
There is nothing more worthy of killing a bitch over than civil infrastructure.
Hell yeah. And of course, the main source of the Proto-Indo-European reconstruction, the Vedic myth, in which Manu and Yama are the twins, and one kills the other with the help of the Ospatar and makes the world from him, but Yama descends into the underworld and becomes the king of the Vedic underworld, which might have been present in broader Indo-European tradition, but we don't really see that much. There might be some hints of it in, like, Tacitus Germania. There's no conclusive thing there. Close Germanic hint is Ymir, maybe Tuisto in the Germania, but they just die. That part's mostly just in the Vedic retelling. There's also common practices that we see, like horse sacrifices. Religious prayers seem to have some commonality. Magical charms seem to have some similarity from, like, Germanic charms to Celtic charms to Vedic charms. There's a lot. That creation myth that I referenced, that seems to be describing the mythic antecedent of sacrifice, essentially.
The whole basis for our religion.
Yeah. Basically, as Manu killed Yemo and split him up and made the world, so do we originally killed things as sacrifice and split them apart to give to gods and men, an emulation of that primordial sacrifice. Obviously, we don't tend to do a lot of animal sacrifice anymore, but I would say even our offerings tend to have elements of that, because, we're doing it in emulation of older things which are themselves connected to myth and legend, which have these ancient fucking bases.
So it's useful in a religion like Anglo-Saxon Heathenry, which doesn't have a lot of recorded practices, sometimes to look at Pi and to the reconstruction of that and what might have been, a commonality with the religions surrounding it to help reconstruct your practice.
But there's a point where you can go too fucking far.
Yep. And this is the part where everything I said I'm about to say little sus. To continue that.
That's what we like to call pie brain.
Yeah,
Very
pie brain.
severely pie-brained.
No crust on this one either. It's uncrustable.
Uncrustable pie brain. So, like, as we can see a lot of things represented in the Indo-European sphere, if you do a little too much with it, like if you lean too heavily, you can get into some interesting shit. Like, especially if you do the pie thing, you do the Proto-Indo-European thing, and ignore what more temporally and geographically neighboring cultures are doing.
You start to throw cultural context out the window.
Yeah, you throw it completely out the window.
And this is why it's important to remember that PIE is a reconstruction. It never actually, to our knowledge, existed.
Not in the way that we are looking at it right now.
So this is a hodgepodge of similarities and patterns that we find in other languages, but far more relevant is the things that people did close together, because that's where the most contact is. There's not a ton of contact between the Anglo-Saxons and I don't know what was a
bunch of fucking
empire?
steppe nomads thousands of years before.
There's not a ton of contact between Anglo-Saxons and Indians living in the Gupta Empire, as there would be between Anglo-Saxons and people living on the continent, or people living in Scandi, particularly Scandi because of invasion and raiding and all that shit that comes with Scandi culture.
For example, there's people who have reconstructed certain pantheon shapes, I guess, certain divine theogonies based from Proto-Indo-European, and discounting the fact that we do share a next to the Norse. And while Anglo-Saxon religion was converted to the Christian shit much earlier than, like, say, the Viking Age, where most of, like, Norse texts come from, I would still probably say that it might have looked a little bit closer to them than to a bunch of steppe nomads in 4000.
Yeah, you run the risk of creating a mirage based on an illusion, based on a guess, which is not to say that Proto-Indo-European stuff isn't incredibly accurate. It's just to say that it's much more not cognizant. The connections in the same time period and geography are much more salient when we're trying to examine people's cultures and religious praxis than necessarily something strictly linguistic.
So, for example, I'm going to use this example because it's the one that comes to mind, and fuck you. Because a pie culture may or may not have had a group of beings that they may have mythologically classified as universe eaters, doesn't mean that every being in cultures that use a word that is descended from them also held them to be universe eaters.
Yeah. Plus, universe eater, it's a damn cool name. If I had something that I thought was damn cool, I might call it a universe eater, even if I don't think it's a universe eater or I don't worship it as a universe eater.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I want to be known as universe eater when I die. Someone put that on my tombstone.
Here lies Glade,
Universe
the world eater.
Yeah, world eater.
Requiescat in pace. On that same vein, just in general, like, just because you might see, like, an example of a thing doesn't mean that that thing existed everywhere.
Right.
Just because there are, like, certain words, certain concepts, cognates, linguistic cognates, as we went over in the Eton episode with our good friend Ingwine. Just because there's a cognate, just because there's an etymological thing to it, doesn't mean that it means the thing.
Cultures change.
Sometimes language is not literal.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Sometimes even language changes.
No, you dare not say, Fishy.
Here's a very good example of this. So let's look back to India and the Middle East. Let's look back to the Vedic peoples, the Indo-Aryan peoples. Again, not my fault. They use Arya first. Nazis just adopted it because they're fucking stupid. Anyway, the Indo-Aryan peoples of India and the Iranian peoples of Iran. Kind of self-explanatory, isn't it? In both of these cultures, they have two words. In India, it is Asuras and Devas. In the Iranian languages, like in Persia, it's Ahuras and Devas or Devas. I'm not 100% sure. You would think that like one word in its cognate would mean the same thing, would be the same thing. Like in India, Devas well, they're the gods. This is the word that is etymologically linked to the Latin deus, to a lot of those words. And Asuras are the not so godly people, not necessarily evil, but kind of a bit not in like the super holy place, you know? This is completely different in the Iranian situation. The Ahuras, which of course is including Ahura Mazda, the chief deity of Zoroastrian religion, of Mazdayan religion. The Ahuras are the good guys, and the Devas are the not so good guys, though their demonization comes a bit later. Just because a word and another word are cognates, don't mean they mean the same thing at all. The context changes, as we have been discussing. Like, language changes, peoples change, everything changes. Without the context, that means jack shit.
I'm just gonna say the quiet part out loud here. Trying to make an argument based off cognates is ridiculous. Like with Eton and Jotun.
With that, with just a lot of things in general.
There's a lot of things, but that's the one that's most salient in my head. Of we say fuck that position.
Yeah.
And even like throwing pie out the window, just going to like different forms of Germanic paganism. Every once in a while, you find somebody who kind of holds them all to be the same thing. And it doesn't really work when you get into it, because like, in Anglo-Saxon heathenry, we have lovingly named certain groups of people Danelaw heathens, which is just, Norse heathens who use Old English words and ignore cultural context of like the Old English peoples.
Yep, they just borrow Old Norse concepts, Old Norse this and that, Old Norse understandings, or popular Old Norse understandings, I should say.
Yeah.
And yeah, while it's fine, it works. I mean, there were literal pagans in the Danelaw, assuredly. You do kind of have to do a bit more work if you're trying to more properly reconstruct what would be actual Anglo-Saxon religion from the time when the Anglo-Saxons themselves were pagan.
And that be a time ago.
It do be a time ago.
It was a different time than the Norse.
Just
True.
A little bit.
Or at least the Norse we have records of.
Yeah, a different time than the Viking Age.
Yeah.
And in the opposite, like, of what we were saying, like, there's times when pie can be, like, useful as supplementary evidence. Because, like, with, say, Aestra, for example, there's an argument that comes up on Twitter every year about whether Aestra was a real thing. And
completely
part
false.
of that discussion... part of that discussion is her name being linked backward to pie and being related to the Roman Aurora, which is something that, Bede would have probably had some trouble doing on his own.
Yeah, just a little bit, because, not really... He wasn't a 9D chess mega linguist. He's just a fucking monk sitting in a monastery being based.
PIE stuff exponentially grows more important the less sources you have. Or like the more isolated the group is. Like for example, if you look at like Brodnovery, you've got a couple of sources, and you've got folklore, and you've got PIE, and that's it. As compared to like if you were doing like a Hellenistic practice, you need PIE is useful, not anywhere near as necessary.
Pie is the reconstruction version of a safety net.
Yeah. If you have no sources,
yeah,
break glass.
Pretty much, honestly, yeah. Like, it's incredibly useful, and it's a good place to go if there's nowhere else to go, or if you need like a path. If you need like a path to look, there's all the pie shit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you rely on it too much, you're not reconstructing a historical religion.
You're constructing pie.
You are basically...
You're baking a pie. Oh, no. Somebody get that on a shirt. Don't go baking pies.
Like it is cool, especially if you acknowledge that what you're doing is pie. I like seeing unique things, and there's a lot of unique things people have done by looking back like that.
Oh yeah,
At least two.
However,
at least two.
However, even then, those people who I am very vaguely shouting out to right now, they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They understand that what they're doing is unique, and they're still making sure to make it fit into their quote-unquote setting.
There's
like they're not
structure.
Yeah, there's a structure, there's a reason, and it works.
They're not using it to establish a recon orthodoxy.
Exactly. They're very clearly doing their own thing, and it's pretty fucking cool. So yeah, like that's pretty much the whole shebang. I hope that you who have stuck with us this entire time have hopefully learned something about some of the more nitty-gritty stuff involving Reconstruction, because I don't know if you got it from what we've been talking about, but this isn't really something that you get from like Baby's First Heathenry thing.
You ain't gonna find PIE in a Silver Raven face book.
Silver Ravenwolf, I think is the name you're thinking of.
Yeah, not claw or face. Distinctly wolf. And you should also be able to tell this by the fact that Sig was speaking for most of this episode. A round of applause to Sig, everybody, carrying us through this, because Sig is a primo reconstructionist.
A pie brain.
A massive pie brain.
I do admit to having a little bit of pie in my brain.
And you know what? We appreciate it. And together we can make a little pie a la mode. I don't like the way that sounds. Anyway.
Woo?
Ooh.
Why do all these episodes end with an ooh woo?
Because get fucked, idiot. I had to get one in by the end of the episode. So TLDR, pie, really useful. Don't overuse it. If you do overuse it, I will hunt you down and I will shit in all of your chocolate and piss in all your apple juice. That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching the Heathen Bitches, everybody. Fishy, take us out.
No,
we don't need to. We can get actual music.
I know. This is where we're just gonna have like a little bit of banter while the music is playing us out.
Oh, that's actually fair. Like the banter that we're doing right now.
Yeah, I bet we're gonna cut it.